Senator, good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Morning.
Help us understand, what do you want to hear, or what do you want to understand from all of this today when you speak with the head of Facebook?
I think one of the things we want to understand is just how pervasive this is. It started out that Facebook indicated there were 300,000 of their users, basically, who had entered into this agreement with this app or this analytics firm, and then that information, which was ultimately given to someone else, turned out to be 50 million, and then eventually 87 million people whose user data may have been misused. So I think determining what that universe is, are there other firms or businesses out there that have had access to people's information that may have been misused? And then secondly, of course, what is Facebook doing to prevent their data from being misused in the future? Those are things we want to find out at the hearing. And then I think, too, just what proactively Facebook intends to do to prevent the kind of, or stop the kind of harmful conduct that we've seen and that now they're having to respond to months and years later. I think we need to find out what steps they're going to take proactively to try and deal with this going forward.
Senator, the larger question for Silicon Valley and perhaps the markets right now is trying to understand, to the extent that after these hearings you start talking or thinking about regulation, what that would look like. Would you be in support of regulating these companies, and if so, how?
Well, that's to be determined. I mean, I would certainly hope. I'm not somebody who's a believer in regulation. I'm a light touch person when it comes to regulation. I do think that we will find out through the course of this process what steps, if there are some, that need to be taken in terms of potentially a regulation. But we've seen Europe go down that path. They've instituted a bunch of regulations in the European Union, some of which perhaps may be applicable here, some of which may not. But I'm not rushing to do that. I know that there are people who say we ought to regulate these social media platforms. I'm not convinced that's the case, but I do think that we have to be open to, if there are steps that need to be taken as a result of coming out of this, that will make these social media platforms more responsible, if you will, and more transparent. I think more than anything else, what most people are looking for at this hearing today, and what most people are looking for from Mark Zuckerberg and other social media platforms, is transparency, accountability. And if they sign user agreements, what are they consenting to?
Right.
And how is that data going to be used?
Senator, at this point, I know it's early going, but I mean, is it safe to say that everything is on the table? You mentioned the general data protection regulations that go into effect in Europe at the end of May. Could that be on the table as well, adopting similar measures? And I know you mentioned some parts of it, but is everything in consideration? I think we're, at this point, yes. I mean, we're open to what may come next. Obviously, we want to get to the bottom of this. It starts today. I give Mark Zuckerberg credit for taking this head on, but I suspect in follow-up to this, we'll be bringing in Cambridge Analytica and some of the other businesses and firms that have had access to this data, may have misused it, and we just want to know how susceptible a platform like Facebook is to being misused in this way. We saw with the Russian meddling in the election. We've had hearings on radicalization on social media platforms. Facebook, of course, has been accused in the last year or so of political bias. There are lots of issues related to social media platforms that have come to the surface now and created, I think, an environment where we need to do more oversight. The question coming out of that is, will it lead to regulation, legislation? And at this point, I don't know the answer to that. But obviously, Europe has moved forward, and we'll see how what they're doing there
Senator,
works.
you're talking about this in the context of Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. Do you imagine hauling in front of your committee leaders from Google, Twitter, Snap, Amazon, et cetera?
Well, we had tried in this hearing to get broader participation from other social media platforms. As you can about understand, they were reluctant to participate in this at this point. But what I will say is, I think that all the social media platforms, when it comes to this issue of privacy, which is becoming more important in people's lives, particularly as we become more aware of how this data is used and in some cases misused, I think there's going to be more of an emphasis on that. And I suspect that in the future, other social media platforms along the lines of those you just mentioned may in fact come forward, or may be called forward, to explain to us what it is they are doing to protect users' privacy, and how might their platforms have been misused in the same way that in this particular case Facebook was.
Senator, Facebook, of course, controlled wholly by Mark Zuckerberg in this instance, given the structure of the company. Do you have any problem with his leadership or continuing leadership of Facebook?
Well, he's the founder. He's the face of Facebook. There are 1.4 billion users every single day of his product. I mean, he seems comfortable with that. I think it's important in this case that he comes forward, owns this issue, takes responsibility for it, which he appears to be doing. And I met with him yesterday, and I think he gets it. He understands that they haven't been forthcoming enough, and that's got to change. And what happens in the future with respect to his company, I suppose, is up to him and his board and shareholders and everyone else. But I think that, at least for now, he seems perfectly comfortable being the face of the company. And at least up until now, most of his users, I think, have been comfortable with that arrangement.
Can you tell us what you talked about during your meeting?
Well, first off, the hearing, 1. 2, privacy. 3, how can a user be meaningfully consenting to these agreements? In some cases, they sign agreements, they don't necessarily know what that means. And I think the transparency issue is one that we were trying to kind of drill down on with him yesterday. But I think
did he appreciate that point, that when you do press consent, you're often consenting to pages of multiple agreements that frankly oftentimes we don't really understand?
Yeah, I think he does understand that, and I think I think in the future at least, the platform, the company is going to be way more forthcoming when it comes to how do you what protections do you build in, what safeguards do you build in to ensure that users actually know what they're consenting to. And then the other thing that I think he gets as well, and which we talked about yesterday too, is the importance of him being the person to come forward and just explain this to the American people, obviously to the Congress, but to the American people through their representatives and directly to them, because obviously there's going to be a lot of interest in this.
Senator, a lot of Wall Street analysts that follow Facebook have come on and said that there has been no drop-off or meaningful drop-off in user engagement or monthly active users because of that. Do you take a look at that data and say, you know what, maybe the public really doesn't care? Maybe this is not an area where we go full throttle in terms of regulation, because it doesn't seem that people are walking with their feet at all.
Yeah, it seems, I think a lot of this is baked in. I think that most people understand that on some level, when they click on this, that they're allowing somebody to have access to certain information. I think the question is how much information and how is it being used or misused. Right. And I think those are the issues that we have to get to. But you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that people are, when you have 1.4 billion users a day accessing this platform, there's a whole ton of people out there who I think understand that the connectivity that they get and the benefits that they get from using Facebook are something obviously that they're willing to give up some of the privacy and sacrifice a little bit of their that information.
Senator, final question, and I just have to touch on it before you go, because we haven't touched on it. It's a different topic, but on Meet the Press on Sunday, your colleague, Mike Rounds, refused to be critical of Pruitt's, what some people call excessive spending at the EPA, and I wanted to know whether you agreed with him.
Well, I think that the president obviously determines whether or not Scott Pruitt stays or goes, and my understanding is at least that the administration is looking into and has some sort of an investigation underway to look at some of these allegations that have been raised. Obviously I think in terms of the things he's done there, he's doing many of the right things with respect to the economy, but obviously these other issues that have come up are, they're not certainly things that you can condone, and I think he's got to answer for that. He's got to be accountable for that.
Okay, we're going to leave the conversation there. Good luck in the hearings today. Of course, we will all be watching.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.